Before I discuss anything, I'll first start with the ultimate example of impermanence, a self-fulfilling prophecy. Dramatic irony, if you will. I was going to pop in all these clips from different films so that you'd understand my references, but there's a little thing called fair use. Anyways, things change, timestamps in the description, let's get into it. So, I'm actually going to start a little unconventionally by first detailing what impermanence is not. The most common misconception is that impermanence is a product that has a finite start and end date. You're born and then you die. Well, yes, but you never know when that day shall be. There's no certainty you'll actually live to 80 plus. Anything could happen. The product doesn't independently start and end. There's a continuum there. This is another point. The continuum also shows impermanence. In every breath you take, there's changeability. Things change moment to moment. There's not 1 second that is not permanent or dependent on the last, but more on that later. So what is impermanence then? The Buddha taught death and impermanence as the first stage of small scope, or first capacity, which is where everyone starts. You need all the scopes, small, medium, great, but all are dependent on the previous. It's like kindergarten and prep, through to high school and university. You'd hardly plonk a toddler in a master's level course. They need some understanding first. The graduated path is like that, and the first step of small scope is learning about and realizing death and impermanence. If you want to begin a meditation practice, just like with any habit, you have to have some discipline and joy. And that's where meditating on and understanding impermanence is crucial. It's an antidote to procrastination because you're reminded of your own demise. Please don't also take this and apply an all or nothing mindset around meditation though. If you don't meditate one day, just get back into it the next. Likewise, don't burn yourself out on the Dharma. It's all good. Balance, Daniel-san. In fact, one of the best meditations is that of the breath. It's the first example given in Geshe Loden's Path to Enlightenment. A great teacher and a great book. This is what Geshe writes. Page 226 for those of you following along at home. Mindfulness of the breath will remind you of impermanence. If the breath were permanent, then its nature would be such that it would not change. It would therefore neither rise nor fall and change in any way. So, as the breath moves in and out, reflect on its momentary changes and recognize its impermanence. The breath is a wonderful tool. It's always there and always changing. You can hold your breath, but you may pass out, and I don't want that for your well-being, nor a lawsuit, but even that shows that things change. Conscious 1 second, unconscious the next. We'll try and stay conscious for this one. It'll be guided, so just let yourself rest. Let your breath return to its natural rhythm. Don't try to control it in any way. Just observe. Observe the rising and falling of the breath. Settle pedal. Observe the rising and falling of the breath. In and out. Don't try to control it. Just rest. Keep your eyes closed or your gaze softened. This will just be a really settling little meditation. Don't count your breath. Just observe it. Its natural rhythm, in and out. You can feel the breath coming in the nostrils
again. If you like, you can just focus on that sensation. Very gentle. Let yourself just relax into it completely. Not thinking about the day thus far or whatever's to come. Just sit with it. If you feel like you're too much in your head, I get it. Focus on the tummy. Focus on the breath at the navel, the rising and falling of the stomach. That should settle things. Help get you out of your head. If there's any external sounds where you are, just ignore them for now and just bring it back to the breath. You can pause this video, repeat the meditation at any point, whenever you need. It's always there. Just rest. Okay, if you'd like to pause the video, feel free, and just stay with the breath a little longer. But right now, we'll get into the next section. So whenever you're ready, just open your eyes, and here we go.
Now that the mind is calmer, we'll discuss more about death and impermanence. Geshe used to quote Lord Buddha in saying, "Death is definite, time of death uncertain." The rest of the quote is, "At the time of death, all that can benefit is Dharma," pure ethics. But it was the first two lines that were most repeated in our household. I'm making my family sound like a bunch of goths, but it's not depressing. It's, as a trio of mice may say, the way things are. And the reason it's so crucial, aside from reminding you to practice ethics and loving kindness for others, is that it alleviates any false sense of security you may have about yourself and all phenomena. I'm not sure who'll be watching this, but all ages know of Bob Dylan, the voice of a generation who is soon to be portrayed by Timothée Chalamet, and one of his most iconic lyrics is, "All the times they are a-changin'." When I hear this nowadays, instead of hearing the lyric, I actually just remember the scene from Anchorman where the narrator says this, "Bob Dylan once wrote, 'The times they are a-changin'.' Ron Burgundy had never heard that song, so when he fell hard." We're all kind of like Ron Burgundy, at least in this sense. in that we don't see the changeable nature of things. We've never turned on the radio station of Dharma. Things are impermanent because they change, and things change because they're impermanent. Did I sound like a politician there? I actually wanted to title this Things Change, Kundun, but didn't want a copyright strike. If you're unfamiliar with Kundun, it's a beautiful film directed by Scorsese about the early life of His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama, Tenzin Gyatso. There's a scene earlier on in the movie where a very young Dalai Lama and the palace sweeper are playing a game of soldiers. His Holiness loses, and Norbu Tundrup, the sweeper, says this: "Today you lose, tomorrow you may win. Things change, Kundun." Life's like that. It's ever-changing. Today or tomorrow may have vastly different outcomes, but then again, so may an hour, minute, or second from now. However, why did I start talking about His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama? Because he is extremely skillful in steering the conversation towards dependent arising or dependent origination, which is what I mentioned earlier about everything depending on causes and conditions. Each moment in time is dependent on the previous, which in turn is dependent on the next, and so on. Dependent origination is a beautiful remedy to the absolute spin-out that can occur if you start to think too deeply about impermanence, or rather, what we usually perceive, false permanence. I gave the example in the blurb about you being able to watch this video, and if you've made it this far, thank you so much. It'll all make sense eventually. But watching this video alone is dependent on so many factors: internet connection, device, your interest in Buddhism, etc., etc., as the king and I would say. To watch this video means that at one point you weren't watching, but if everything were permanent, you could hardly watch anything because watching is present tense and denotes a passing of time. Time? Everything would just have to be the same, but it couldn't be, because how could you exist if nothing changed? Your parents couldn't have as well, and how far back do we take that? There'd be nothing, but that means an absence of something. This can go on forever, until you end up spinning out like your weird conspiracy theorist uncle. Thankfully, your thoughts don't have to have the same absurdist quality as Douglas Adams or Terry Pratchett or insert sci-fi writer here, because the remedy is already there. It's understanding the relationship between all things, dependent arising. And this is not possible without first understanding impermanence. See what I did there? That was a dependent arising, man. When I said we see a false permanence, it's not that we think, yes, I am perceiving permanence. We just don't realize the incredibly intricate details that make up all phenomena. We don't see the passing of time that allows one thing to become the next. We're just like, oh, that's nice, dear. We see a thing and name it something because that's what it is, but it's not. It hasn't always been that thing. It's just a collection of parts, which in turn are all dependent on their collection of parts, and so on and so forth. When this video is published, I too will think, cool, that's out there. But in actual fact, there's all the aggregate of details that come together to create it. You, the viewer, without getting too zen, if a video is posted on the internet and nobody watches, the beautiful temple in which we meditate, Geshe Loden having had the vision to repay the kindness of Australians by creating such a beautiful temple and grounds, and the festivals dating back 30 plus years. The Tibetan Buddhist Society Melbourne in continuing to host these festivals and in giving me the opportunity to speak, doing all the background work and so on. The precious texts containing the Buddha's teachings, the many teachers I've had, such as Geshe Loden, Sozep Tulku Rinpoche, Les She, and so on. And this is not even to mention the cups of tea that keep the Sleeman life force going. These are just scratching the surface. You have your own story as well, Bastian Balthazar Bucks. It's all an interconnected network. Impermanence and dependent arising allow all things to happen. There's actually a beautiful quote by Arya Deva about how merely recollecting the emptiness of inherent existence is enough to shake the very foundations of ignorance. There's a simple meditation exploration you can do yourself, mahamudra. It means great seal. Not that kind of seal. Seal like a stamp. You've stamped out ignorance, put your mark on it, sent it off to the post office, and now you're just chilling. To get to that rested state, we'll begin once again with the breath, settling the mind, observing the rise and fall of the breath. Then start scanning your own form. Keep your eyes closed and just try to find an aspect of yourself that isn't dependent on other things.
Okay, so we'll begin by scanning first the feet, and then moving all the way up the body to the head, from the tippy toes to the top of the crown. So if you'd like, start with just the foot and consider all the parts that make up one of your feet. You've got your ankles, your toes, but even with just one toe you can see the toenail, the cells, the atoms, so many composite of parts. And that's just a little toe on a human body. And then if you continue scanning yourself with your eyes closed, just taking notes mentally, you've got the feet, the ankles, the legs, the bum, the hips and tummy, the torso, your shoulders, arms, down to your hands and their little fingers, your neck holds your little head. I keep saying little, but it's just Bob Ross's influence. Your head. The head, of course, has the face, which so many people recognize you with, and yet the face is always changing, moment to moment, depending also on your mental state, certainly how you perceive yourself. If you're not having a great body image day, then you'll pick apart everything, and yet all those things are just changing moment to moment. Your eyes and nose and mouth, it's still the same you. The ears, the hair, and since we've been in lockdown, your hair is probably a really good example of change. It's either grown out long and bushy or possibly greyed a little bit from the stress. And that's okay. Things change. So if you'd like, you can concentrate on one aspect of your human form that is, of course, dependent on so many limitless factors, really. It's easiest to choose the body as a whole because there's all those factors that make up for it, that make up it. But you can't have the whole without its parts. Nagarjuna, of course, reference this many, many times. If you're familiar with mahamudra and you do it quite often, and further, if you're familiar with the 5 aggregates the transitory collection. You can further this meditation with feeling, discrimination, compositional factors, and consciousness, the mind. But I think, given this is just an introductory lesson, we'll just stick with the form. Seeing its change moment by moment, and even the moments in between those moments, it's quite extraordinary. And if you are feeling a bit flustered with this, I understand. And if you'd like, you can bring the mind in at this point and observe when the mind changed. When it changed from, oh yeah, okay, a meditation, to when's this going to end? Or I really don't get this. I get it. I've been there, and quite often actually, but just observe that as well. And if it's too much, you're just not feeling it today, then that's okay. Bring it back to the breath. The mind rides on the wind like a horse. So the wind in this instance is your breath, traveling in and out. So to settle it, come back. Start with the breath. It should subdue the mind as well. And then feel free to come back to mahamudra, great seal of enlightenment, at any point. I'll end the little meditation here. If you'd like to keep picking apart your own form or mind or any of the other three aggregates, if you feel like doing that, then pause the video, sit with it. I get it. But if you'd like to move on, then gently open your eyes. The video is almost over. You're done good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for making it this far. As we've learnt, things are impermanent, and thus all meeting leads to parting. So I'll have to leave you there.